Hey, spooky friends. Welcome to another episode of the Scaryish podcast.
Woo!
It sounded like a ghost.
I feel like a ghost.
I'm Robin Grace. This is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And we're here to tell you folks about some interesting topics that are a little bit scary-ish.
Indeed, we are. What are you going to be covering this week, Robin?
I'm going to be covering the Lady of the Dunes.
That sounds interesting. There was a Lady of the Dunes where I'm from, too, but I don't think this is the same story.
Your voice sounds interesting.
It does. I'm going to be covering the Men in Black, which I'm excited to do. I've been putting this one off for a minute, so... But yeah, let's go ahead and address that really fast. I'm sick, in case you haven't noticed, so that sucks. But yeah, we'll try and get through this episode as best we can. And I will say, interesting story, we're out of Dayquil. So I had to take NyQuil to try and clear myself a bit more. And I get really, really sleepy with NyQuil. So we are definitely in a race to the finish right now to see how long I can last. But I'm pretty excited. Stuff that's happened to us over the last week. Anything interesting, Robin?
Anime convention, work, new job, first day.
Lots and lots and lots of stuff.
Yeah?
Yeah. I've been sick, so I barely went to the anime convention, and it was fun, though. It was fun when we went, and I will say ALA had this ribbon collecting thing where you gotta, like, tape these ribbons to your badge, and they all said something different and funny. And some people had badges that had so many ribbons on them that they were, like, 2 stories high, which was pretty cool, so that was fun to participate in for the first time. For me, at least. I don't know if you've ever been to a convention where you got to do that before.
Just a manager's conference for GameStop.
Really?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, you only got it if you got, like, best shrink percentage, best reservations, best customer service.
So they were awards at that point.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah.
So, right on. All right, before we move on to the topics and before I lose all my energy, I just have to go ahead and remind everyone, it is January Patreon push, which means go over to patreon.com/scarishpodcast and sign up to support our wonderful show. Do you have a dollar lying around? 4 quarters? 10 dimes? Once a month, if you give that to us, you're going to get early access to all of our content, which is pretty sweet. And there's a bunch of tiers above that offer some pretty fun stuff as well. So please go over to patreon.com/scarishpodcast and sign up. We do have goals for when we get to 150 patrons. We're going to spend the night at the Stanley Hotel and record an episode while we're there. We are currently hovering around the 100 mark, and we would love to see that break into the triple digits. So help us out and go to patreon.com/scarishpodcast and become one of our many wonderful patrons. We would sincerely appreciate it. All right, Robin, go ahead and take it on over and jump into your topic.
All right, so this week I'm going to be doing true crime because it is a true crime kind of week, and it's going to be me telling you about the Lady of the Dunes, like I said, which is often referred to as the Lady in the Dunes as well, but she's not actually in a dune or anything, it's just in this area. All right, so we're going to be sticking stateside this week, and we're going to be heading to the East Coast to Provincetown, Massachusetts, which I had to ask Adam if was actually like East Coast. And apparently it touches the ocean. So yes, it is East Coast. On July 26, 1974, a 12-year-old Leslie Metcalf and her family were walking with their dog along Race Point Dunes. As they were on this walk, their dog ran off, barking all of a sudden. And to this, the young girl gave chase. So she was running after her dog. And while she was running after her dog, she spotted what she thought was a dead deer. Upon closer examination, turns out it was in fact a decomposing human body.
Gross.
Which is funny because your cousin has had her dog run off and bring back a deer leg.
Like a femur that had like meat and blood hanging off of it. And her first reaction was, is this an animal or is this a body she found out in the woods?
So to me, when I read this, I was like, this is a horror movie. There have been horror movies, right? Where it's like girl walking along in the woods or whatever with her pet and runs into something absolutely horrific. And murder in itself is pretty horrific. But the body of this woman was lacking enough evidence for investigators to figure out who she was. Despite the body being mere yards from the nearest road, high insect activity actually did a lot of damage to the body before it was even discovered. It was determined that the person may have died weeks before being found. So it was like 10 days to 3 weeks.
It's a pretty big range. They must have had like an outbreak of insects, kind of like when we had all those grasshoppers in Vegas a few years ago.
It's in July, so it's hot.
Right.
So if it were in the winter, I assume it wouldn't be as crazy, but because it's in the summer, it's hot. You're by the ocean, so the humidity, bugs are probably just all up in that.
You know what I picture? The scarabs from The Mummy. When they crawl over the body, and then all of a sudden it's just a skeleton.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure it wasn't that bad, but it was pretty bad. Bad enough, at least, to make it really difficult to identify this person. Investigators noted 2 sets of footprints that led to the body and a set of tire tracks that were 50 yards, or about 46 meters, away from the crime scene. She was found with a blue bandana and a pair of Wrangler jeans under her head, folded like a pillow. She had long red hair that had been pulled back into a ponytail using a gold-flecked elastic band, like a gold-flecked hair tie. She had toenails that were painted pink, and she was found face down on half of a green beach blanket. There was no sign of a struggle, so this led investigators to believe that she was either killed in her sleep or she was caught unaware by someone she knew. Upon examination, she was found to be, 5'6". Some thought 5'8". I'm sure it's really hard to determine the height of a person, when they've already started to decompose. She was about 140 to 150 pounds. Somehow, through the magic of medical investigation, because I have no idea how they determined that, they determined that she had an athletic build. I don't know when you're decomposing how you figure that out. It's kind of crazy how medical examiners do that. I think that's pretty interesting. Her age was said to be anywhere as young as 20 and as old as 49. She had extensive dental work done, estimated to be worth like $5,000 to $10,000 at that time. Dentists called the dental work she had done like New York style. Some sources said it was like gold fillings or gold crowns, that kind of stuff. Several of her teeth had been removed, so that's weird. I assume her teeth were removed to kind of prevent her identification, or somebody had a weird, creepy teeth fetish where they were like, yes, I'd like to remove your teeth now.
Could be a souvenir thing too. I know most of the time teeth are taken to prevent the identity from being revealed, but I just think of the show where
I don't think he was into taking their teeth.
He kept them though. He kept the teeth of multiple people he killed because she found them at the end of season 1. Spoiler alert.
Was there teeth in there?
Yep.
Ew.
When she dropped it, they scattered everywhere.
Oh, ew. Okay. Gross. And then for more gruesome aspects of it, she was missing both hands and one forearm. This too, I assume, was to prevent fingerprinting and identification. Investigators obviously thought the same, that it was either to prevent the discovery of the identity or that of the victim or that of the killer. Like they didn't want any evidence found on their hands or whatever. What's weird is that where their hands should have been were piles of pine needles. Not that the rest of it isn't weird, but I think the fact that this person was like, let's put piles of pine needles there, just, they staged the whole body. And it is just like something out of a horror movie where they went through so much effort for this. She was just about decapitated, nearly headless, you might say. Strangulation may have been involved. One side of her head had been crushed by something along the lines of a shovel or a military entrenchment tool, which is like a sharper shovel that has like other sharp tools on it. This trauma was determined to be the cause of death, so she did die from this head trauma. Signs of sexual assault were presumed to be post-mortem, which is gross.
Yeah. Some
sources say it involved some type of wooden block, which is also gross. During the investigation, thousands of missing persons cases were compared. Vehicles in the area were compared to the tire tracks found near the scene, and there were no leads in either line of this investigation. Because of how the sand and blanket appeared at the crime scene, Like, because she was staged that way, investigators were led to believe that she had been killed somewhere else and then moved to this particular area. Other than what was found at the scene during the initial extensive search, nothing else was found to point police in the direction of any further line of investigation. So Jane Doe, the lady in the dunes, or of the dunes, was buried in October of 1974 at St. Peter's Cemetery, after which no further discoveries were made on the case, at least not in a way that would definitely or definitively solve her unknown identity or who may have killed her. Her tombstone reads, quote, "Unidentified female body found, Race Point Dunes," end quote.
Wow.
That's what her tombstone says. That's pretty sad.
Yeah, can you imagine having your life reduced to unknown person, this is where they died on your tombstone? Yeah. That's so sad.
There was a facial reconstruction created in 1979 using clay. Not sure what parameters they used to do so, because I know now we have a lot more advanced technology to do facial reconstructions. But it's impressive that they were able to do that, especially because there were a lot of calls that were like, this looks like so-and-so, or this looks like so-and-so. But now we put like pinpoints on different aspects of a skull that give you an idea of what the person looks like. Maybe they did that back then, just in a more analog way. I'm sure there's somebody out there that's like, I do this for a living. If you do, let us know. That's really interesting. Her body was exhumed in 1980 for further examination, and maybe they had new technology or new ideas at the time which led them to do so, but nothing new was discovered. In March of 2000, they exhumed her again, and this time it was to specifically collect DNA. In May 2010, authorities ran her skull through a CT scanner in order for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children to generate a digital facial reconstruction. So that's the more advanced ones that we probably see on milk cartons and stuff like that. I don't know. But Tony Costa was a serial killer in the area for a time and was a suspect at some point. He was eliminated as a suspect, though, when they found out that he died on May 12th, 1974, when the body was found in July of 1974. So it was impossible for him to have done it because she'd only been dead a few weeks, you know?
Right.
And he'd been dead for months. So.
How did he die?
I think in jail or something like that. I forget how he died. Apparently, in 1987, a woman told a friend of hers that she witnessed her father strangle a woman in Massachusetts in 1972. Police attempted to contact this woman, but by the time they got to her, she moved away or something, and so they couldn't get in touch with her. Then another woman told police that the reconstruction of the victim looked like her sister, who had recently moved to Boston and then went missing in 1974. But this tip was also a dead end. They also looked into a Rory Jean Kessinger, who was 25 at the time of the murder, and she had broken out of jail in 1973 and hadn't been seen since. They thought that she had a resemblance to that of the victim, which is why they thought she may have been the one, but they were able to compare the DNA of the Lady of the Dunes to that of Kessinger's mother, and it just didn't match. So, and you can tell, even if it's the mom, there's the familial, DNA signs, whatever they're called.
Right.
Again, police looked into numerous missing persons cases, and none of them matched that of this particular woman. In 1981, a woman who resembled the victim was brought to the attention of investigators, and it was a woman who was seen with a mobster named James Whitey Bulger, and he was known for removing the victim's teeth, which is why people connected the two. I don't think he did it to everyone, but he did do it from time to time. The woman seen with him is assumed dead, which is they don't know if she's dead or not. She could still be walking around somewhere, who knows. But he was murdered in prison in 2018, and was never made a formal suspect. So, who knows? Maybe that woman is dead. Maybe she's alive. No one knows.
I've never heard the name Whitey Bulger a bunch before.
Really?
I'm not really too up on like true crime or mobsters, but Whitey Bulger is a name that absolutely stands out to me. So.
All right. Interesting, because it doesn't for me. In August of 2015, there was speculation that she could be an extra from Jaws. But if anybody's ever seen Jaws, there's 1,000,001 extras in that movie. It's the one from 1975, And it had been shot in Martha's Vineyard, which was about 100 miles south of Provincetown, Massachusetts, between May and October of 1974. According to the interwebs, Joe Hill, the son of Stephen King, brought the theory to police attention because, of course, he would. Any tweet, any little tweet, everyone's going to pay attention to because it's Joe Hill. Maybe it's a hype for something he's writing or doing, But he had been watching the 4th of July scene, the beach scene, in Jaws, and he noticed that there was a woman wearing a blue bandana and jeans that were similar to those found at the crime scene. And many have looked at this theory as a random coincidence and wild speculation, which I would believe too, because he later on was like, there's a bunch of women in that movie that wear that exact same, the blue bandana thing.
I was going to say, that seems like it's a common look for the 70s.
Right. And there are those that say hundreds, if not thousands, of women during the 70s wore that exact thing. Right. So, the film crew didn't even record anyone's name when it came to extras because there were so many. So they wouldn't even be able to keep track anyway. It's just, that doesn't lead anywhere. That clue leads to nothing. Hayden Clark, another serial killer, actually confessed to the murder. He stated, quote, "I could have told the police what her name was, but after they beat the shit out of me, I wasn't going to tell them shit. This murder is still unsolved, and what the police are looking for is in my grandfather's garden." End quote.
Whoa.
But nothing has come of it, right? Authorities report that Clark suffers from paranoid schizophrenia, so this is believed to lead individuals to falsely confess to crimes. And he has said that he's killed before and tried to lead police to certain things, and it's kind of led to nothing. So they have him say this, right? That he's told them this. He's confessed. But they're like, he said stuff before. He's a little bit crazy. We're not going to take this seriously. In 2004, he sent a letter to his friends stating that he killed a woman in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. And he also sent 2 drawings with this letter. And one was of a handless, naked woman sprawled on her stomach, and then another drawing of a map that pointed to where the body was found. In April of 2000, Clark led police to a spot he claimed to be the burial site. Of 2 victims from 20 years prior. He also claimed to have murdered several others in different states between the 1970s and the 1990s. So they don't necessarily believe everything he says. He is supposedly a serial killer, but he's gonna claim whatever crimes he can, apparently. Who knows? But yeah, so overall the case does remain unsolved. The Lady of the Dunes still remains unidentified. Her murder still remains unsolved. 48 years later, and the whole case is really still a mystery because they have no idea who she is or who killed her. It's just random dead body, which is so sad. In 2019, it was announced that investigators would attempt to re-examine the case using DNA analysis and genealogy tracking, kind of like the one that they used to find the Golden State Killer. So who knows? Maybe they'll be able to find something using that. It's been 3 years since
I was going to say,
then,
when I heard 2019, it sounds like a year ago to me, but realistically it's 3 years ago, so it's just disheartening that it's been so long and we haven't heard anything new on it. Yeah, but we'll see. Who knows? The Golden State Killer took forever. Right.
So we'll figure it out. We'll find out.
It's really sad when the victim does not have a name. Like, that bothers me on a different level.
Yeah.
Because it's just, there's someone out there who does not know what happened to their family member. And as horrific as it would be to find out your family member is murdered, it seems like it's almost even worse to just never know what happened and they just disappeared.
Yeah.
So either way, I'm glad you covered this topic because now I know about it and I will be looking in the headlines to see if anything pops up.
Knowing is half the battle.
It is.
G.I. Joe.
Good stuff. All right. So before we move into my topic, we're going to take a quick commercial break. All right, we are back. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in. This week, I really wanted to dig into the roots of what scares me here on Scaryish. I've mentioned some of my fears on the show before. I think we even had a topic episode where we covered our top 5 biggest phobias, which was therapeutic. It was fun to do. But one of the big things that scares me in regards to topics is aliens, is extraterrestrial entities. I'm not necessarily scared that I'll be abducted. I just get creeped out at the idea of a superior form of intelligence watching me or like just being after me. It's definitely something that makes me uncomfortable. And to that end, the idea that there are human beings on the planet who deal with them and that they could just be as dangerous, if not more so, is equally off-putting to me. But it's also very interesting. So yes, as the title showed, as I have mentioned, I will be covering the Men in Black this episode.
You're going to tell us all about Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones.
We're getting into the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a story all about how their lives got turned upside down.
Oh, god dang it.
Aliens. So, as always, we'll slap on the old Scaryish disclaimer of this could all be bullshit. I would also like to point out something that anyone who takes the topic of Men in Black or extraterrestrials or UFOs really seriously should listen to. Like, really, really listen to me right now. Stories about the Men in Black are not in short supply. All right? There's plenty. And I can't cover all of them, which is obvious. But it should also be remembered that there are a lot of stories about the, quote, Men in Black, unquote, that can apply to any person wearing a black suit with black shoes and a black tie that acts weird. So if by the end of this I come around to a conclusion that isn't an absolute stamp that they existed and have been uncovered by my research, keep that in mind, because any asshole can just be a creeper in a black suit. It doesn't mean they're part of a secret government agency. It can literally be they're just an asshole that wears that uniform. So, speaking of assholes in black suits, let's talk about the Men in Black. You know the Men in Black. Here come the Men in Black.
Oh, it's the song.
Is
that
really
in the new
hard.
Men in Black movie?
I've not seen it international. Okay. I'm pretty sure it's a different... I don't think they have that song, but I don't know.
Oh, it's a good song. I remember singing that as a kid.
The Will Smith song?
Yeah.
I thought it was fun, but I was a kid. So I do say in this good God, it's going to be hard not to quote movies or songs in this topic. So what I wasn't aware of regarding the Men in Black is that their existence has an origin date, specifically in the early 1900s, mid-1900s, that I didn't realize was supposedly their first appearance. Now, there's a lot of things that dispute this, and I will cover those as well, but we're gonna talk about June 27th, 1947. A man named Harold Dahl was on a conservation mission on the Puget Sound. Now, if you're like me, you don't know what the fuck the Puget Sound is.
You don't know what that is?
No. A sound is a small or smaller body of water connected to a larger body of water like a sea or an ocean. The Puget Sound is in Washington State, for those that don't know. And, in fact, when we were in Seattle and had lunch looking out on the water, that was the Puget Sound. So it's like right next to Seattle. So Harold was out there on that same water, gathering logs and shit. Like, no joke, according to History.com, his actual duties that morning were to be collecting logs. And while he was on the water, he looked up, and he saw 6 donut-shaped objects in the sky, roughly half a mile above his boat. While he was staring at them, wondering aloud what the F they were, one of those objects began to rapidly descend, and it rapidly descended 1,500 feet, which is a lot of feet. If it's half a mile above him, it's around 2,700 feet above him.
All right.
So it cuts that distance by 2/3. And as it does that, metallic debris falls from the sky where this object is, and when it lands, it actually collides with Charles Dahl, which is Harold's son, and their family dog, who were both on the boat with Harold.
So
Charles suffers injuries to his arm that are not life-threatening, but the family dog, unfortunately, does die from this falling debris.
Sad.
Right? During this whole shit show, Harold takes out his camera and snaps a few pictures of the crafts. And I will say, I looked for these pictures online, and since this is a topic about the Men in Black, I'm pretty sure they've all been deleted out of existence before the internet ever existed. So that said, some of the pictures I did find are the funniest Photoshop shit I've ever seen. Like, I'll pick my favorite and put it up on our Insta for this topic. It's going to be something along these lines of a body of water, a dog photoshopped into a boat.
Oh, God.
And then a UFO photoshopped crashing into said dog. And they all look ridiculous and hilarious. So I'll put that up. Anyways, back to Harold. He took these pictures and did what any rational person would do in this situation. He took the pictures to his supervisor, Fred Chrisman. Fred Chrisman was a skeptic. And he was like, I don't know what it could have been that you saw or what's in these pictures, but I'm not sure I trust your assessment. Like, that's a really shitty supervisor. Like, your son's injured, your dog's dead, and he doubts you. So Fred's like, I don't know. Sounds a little far-fetched to me. I better go check it out myself. So the next day, Fred goes to check it out. And while Harold is at home, waiting to hear back from his claim that he put into HR on his son's medical bills and a stipend for a new dog.
What? Can you even do that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
There's a knock on his door. So he goes to his door and he opens it to find a person standing there in this weird uniform. And it was, of course, a Girl Scout selling cookies. And he asked for some Samoas, and she's like, you don't want Thin Mints? And he's like, ugh, barf, Thin Mints taste like imitation chocolate mixed with toothpaste. And he slammed the door in her face.
Is that what you really think about Thin Mints?
I hate Thin Mints. I really do. So,
Thin Mints hate you.
Side note, the Girl Scouts started selling cookies as early as 1917, so this is totally a plausible story. This is 30 years after that. So then as Harold walks away, shoving at least 2 Samoas into his mouth, there was another knock at the door.
I thought he didn't buy any.
No, like he bought them, and then she asked him for Thin Mints. That's when he was like,
okay.
Get the fuck out of my house. So he gets the second knock, and he opens the door saying, Jesus Christ, I don't want any fucking Thin Mints. And is immediately cut off when the sight of a man standing at his door wearing a black suit is there instead of a Girl Scout. And there is no Girl Scout, by the way, just in case you didn't pick up on that. There isn't much description of what conversation happens here, but the man in black requests that Harold accompany him to a local diner. And Harold says, sure, why not? I hate life. So
what the what?
Because clearly he wanted to die. The man in black was able to tell him what he had seen. So the man in black recounts the event that occurred, but with much more accuracy, stunning detail. And he then says, quote, this is supposedly a real quote. I'm not making this one up. What I have said to you is proof that I know a great deal more about this experience of yours than you will want to believe. And Harold agreed. This guy knew too much, and it was creepy. And then the man in black told him in no specific terms that Harold chose to disclose to keep his fucking mouth shut, or those would be the last Samoas he would ever eat. So Harold does what any logical person would do again, and he decides to go tell his supervisor. The man in black came to visit me. He talked shit about my cookies, and he threatened my life. And his supervisor says, that is friggin' weird. And after some discussion, the two of them decide to do what any 2 reasonable people would do in this situation. They called up a magazine, and they said, we'd like to sell our story, please. And the thing about selling your story to a decent magazine is, as long as it's not like a piece of shit tabloid, basically, they're going to check to see if you're lying before they buy it. They're going to see if they can confirm this, which this magazine does. And you know how they do that? They reach out to other folks in the area, in the military, with similar stories to corroborate what you have now said. And a pilot named Kenneth Arnold, who we have mentioned in a previous episode, had an incident in Mount Rainier, Washington, 3 days earlier that gained some attention. So the Chicago Magazine reaches out to him to state, is this similar to what you saw? Once they reach out to him, he doesn't talk to them too much. He gets off the phone, he calls his superiors and says, yo, a Chicago Magazine is asking me about this secret thing that people aren't supposed to be talking about. And so the Army dispatches 2 officers of Army A2 intelligence to investigate Harold and his supervisor. So at this point, the shit's hitting the fan. Side note, I tried to track down how high A2 is, and there are so many different letter-number combinations of intelligence within the U.S. military. It's kind of hard to figure it out. The best I could find is that it was intelligence specific, not related to personnel or operations or logistics or civil military operations. It was only for intelligence is what these guys were officers in. And they're people who knew shit, basically. Also, the Army uses G as their abbreviation now instead of A, which is kind of weird. But either way, these 2 guys show up like a week later. It's early July to speak to Harold and his supervisor wanting to know everything. There's no confirmation on whether they were told to keep their mouths shut at the end of this conversation or how the interaction was handled. They gather all this information and they leave. What is known, and this is real, is that those two officers got onto their B-25 airplane that they had taken out to talk to Harold and the supervisor. They get up in the sky to go back to where they came from. While they're in the sky, the plane bursts into flames.
So, like, it
crashes
explodes
to the ground. It doesn't explode. It just starts on fire, falls from the sky when it's disabled, and crashes. This could have simply been a coincidence. Something could have ignited in the sky, or it could be payback. I'm just saying, like, pilot spots a UFO on the 24th. Civilian sees UFOs on the 27th. One of them has debris falling, like it's been struck, maybe. Like the people around there have been warned, yo, there's shit in the sky 3 days earlier, and everyone's itchy trigger fingering at this point. And then about a week later, one of our planes bursts into flames and crashes from the sky. That's kind of how it sounds to me if I have my tinfoil hat on. So, this right here is supposedly the first account of a man in black officially approaching someone to silence them regarding an encounter with an unidentified flying object. Despite the fact there have been so many reports of the mysterious men in black, their appearance almost never changes. Some descriptions give them hats or sunglasses, or some both. Some say they have oddly colored skin. Some even say they have glowing eyes, but that's about the difference. They're always wearing the same outfit. This isn't the account that really made people hear about the men in black either. That happened a few years later from a man named Albert Bender. Albert Bender was a UFO enthusiast who, like you, dear listener, or Robin, not me, just in case they're listening, who let his enthusiasm get the better of him, and his enthusiasm for the nature of the subject led him to gather up a bunch of information on the subject, and in that case, it gathered the attention of the Men in Black. So 3 MIBs, as I'll just call them because I'm tired of saying Men in Black so much, 3 MIBs show up at his door, as opposed to 1 for this incident. According to his book, which released in 1962, about 9 years after this incident, these 3 MIBs, quote, floated about a foot off the floor.
Sounds like bullshit.
They looked like clergymen, but wore hats similar to the Homburg style. So Homburg is very similar to a fedora. It's the hat you would imagine when you like think of someone from the 1950s or 60s wearing a hat, basically. Have you ever seen The Adjustment Bureau with Matt Damon, where he's being hunted by people wearing the hats?
Yeah.
Those are Homburgs. So, all right, anyways, the quote continues. The faces were not clearly discernible, for the hats partly hid and shaded them. The eyes of all 3 figures suddenly lit up like flashbulbs. They seemed to burn into my very soul as the pains above my eyes became almost unbearable. End quote. So it definitely sounds like the flashy thing from Men in Black that we're all accustomed to.
Okay.
That makes you forget shit. This is his account in his book. His account has been written many times by other authors as well, and it became the popular thing that brought the Men in Black to the forefront of especially UFO conspiracy theorists. Now, I should also mention that he was absolutely obsessed with aliens in every aspect of the word obsessed. The disappearance of aircrafts of Flight 19. Do you remember we talked about that during the Bermuda Triangle episode? Where it's like they're at Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and they flew out and they got lost. They never came back. That was his inciting incident to inspire his fascination and eventual obsession. He was an obsessive compulsive. He was diagnosed. He had specific locations for everything. He had rituals that he had to go through when he was just walking around his house. At one point, after his story was published, he painted the walls of his attic as his mental state deteriorated with, quote, grotesque, nightmarish creatures, end quote. The painting didn't take a night or a few nights. He actually worked on it obsessively for 8 months until he had these creatures that he claimed were after him painted on his walls, which I have no idea why he would do that. He was haunted, to say the least. Perhaps not literally, but who knows? He has a cousin that states that they saw the woman in black, that old legend from the UK.
Oh, yeah.
That later died in mysterious circumstances.
What?
And then there was another crazy thing that happened to someone in his family that they all attributed to be some form of possession or like demon haunting. So they have some really weird stuff in their family, but you gotta wonder whether or not it's people being raised in a family that takes all this stuff very seriously and is very fearful, becoming obsessed with that exact thing. So he's not the only person that has a different description of the Men in Black or interprets them differently. In his case, it certainly sounds like they're extraterrestrials, or they're in some way, shape, or form demonic entities. And I say that because there are a lot of folks that actually believe the Men in Black exist and are either angels or demons. And this goes back to biblical texts. I found a book, guys, and this book was fucking crazy. It's just page after page after page citing biblical texts of different encounters or visitations with angels, one even with God himself. And they're described as being a man or men in white. And I don't know why men in white translates to men in black for these folks, but there is so many translations that these texts have been through to get them to English that is kind of discarded. And the fact that it's identical, in quotes, saying man in white is what kind of feeds this particular theory. Some folks posit that black doesn't stand out, and that's why the change was made from men in white to men in black. Some folks think that they're actually just demons who really subscribe to the whole team colors thing and decided by wearing like black, they would point out they're not the men in white, they're not the angels, they're not the good guys. This is the part where I again remind you folks that people can interpret a man in black as anyone who shows up in history or fable or folklore or theology that's essentially dressed in black. So one of the things I found funniest while researching this is I was actually able to identify one single specific person from a man in black spotting in 1967. So this took place in 1967 in West Virginia. And multiple people spotted someone walking around dressed in a black suit that certainly looks like a man in black. And, of course, it was 1967 in West Virginia, and things that were popping off at the time regarded a flappy boy we all know and love called the Mothman.
Okay.
In the late evenings of 1967, several witnesses saw a man in black wandering around areas that had been reported as areas the Mothman was sighted. Turns out the man was named John Keel. He was investigating the areas for work on his book, known as the Mothman Prophecies, which is a very famous book regarding the Mothman.
Right.
He stated he was mistaken for a man in black when he was searching for a phone to call a tow truck because his car broke down.
Wow.
So I think it's another example of how sometimes your stories can basically be your fears getting the best of you, you know?
Yeah.
You've heard of men in black. People are scared of them. Something like the Mothman pops up. You see anyone dressed in a dark suit, all of a sudden there's men in black in your town, you know? So some of these stories about the men in black can actually get scary. So a man named Dr. Herbert Hopkins was a consultant on a UFO case out in Maine. And one night he received a phone call asking him if he'd be willing to discuss UFOs.
Who? Okay.
The caller identified themselves as an activist within the UFO community. And Dr. Herbie Hoppy was like, oh, hell yeah, dog, swing on by. So a few minutes later, just a few minutes, there was a knock on the door. He answered, and it was a man dressed in a black suit. So the MIB apparently had no hair, no eyebrows, and extremely pale skin.
I feel like I've heard of this one.
This was creepy. The doctor's dog, upon seeing this man, immediately began barking and continued barking when he entered the home. So the MIB only asked questions about the case the doc had already been consulting on. That's all he was interested in was the case that he was already a part of. After he stopped asking questions, he told the doctor very matter-of-factly, there are 2 coins in your pocket. The doctor was like, yup. How do you know that? Because there were 2 coins in his pocket. The MIB then told him to take one of the coins out, so the doctor did. He held it out in his hand, and the MIB said, watch the coin. And while he watched, it suddenly started to glow slightly. And the glow grew more and more in intensity until the light made it difficult to focus on the coin itself. And then the light started to fade. And when the light had faded, the coin was gone. So the doctor said, where did the coin go? And the MIB replied that it would not be seen, quote, on this plane again. Which is really creepy. To use a term like this plane is fucked up.
Yeah, like in this universe or this world.
As soon as I saw it, I was like, man, that's some D&D shit right there. So the MIB then asked the doctor if he had heard of a man named Barney Hill, who had gained notoriety for claiming to have been abducted by aliens. The doctor said yes, because he had heard of him, especially since he had died a few years prior.
Oh, okay.
The MIB then stated, quote, Barney didn't have a heart, like you no longer have a coin.
What?
So basically how he made this guy's coin disappear.
He made his heart disappear?
He made his heart disappear, and that's how he died.
What the fuck?
Side note, Barney Hill actually died of a cerebral hemorrhage, according to official documents that I looked up. He didn't die of a heart missing.
Well, official, quote-unquote, official documents.
Oh, yeah, they can make a heart disappear. They can totally just check the wrong box. So.
Yeah, you can do. I mean, when it comes to death records and stuff like that, I don't always believe those because you can pay off a coroner or whatever. Right. So... the
MIB, in this case, then tells him destroy anything he had regarding the UFO case they had spoken of, and to drop it, and then left. The last MIB story I'm going to tell you is one that creeps me out especially. So, this is one about a radio host named Danny Gordon, which is like a podcast host, but in the past, before you could listen to them not recorded. And Danny Gordon started reporting on a bunch of UFO sightings centered in Wythe County, Virginia. I think this is 35, 40, 45 years ago, somewhere around there. He started interviewing people because there were so many UFOs in the area and collecting pictures and taking statements. An entire school bus and the driver witnessed a UFO hover over the local mall before it disappeared, and he spoke to all of them as well. He himself got some pictures of UFOs as they were happening. All of his investigating caught the attention of the supposed men in black. Gordon receives a phone call from someone who stated that they were ex-military. The individual warned him if he continued along his path, it would, quote, cost him everything. He closed by telling him to drop it, quote, for his family's sake. So he's getting veiled threats by phone calls from, quote unquote, ex-military people. So he winds up not dropping it. And not long after, 2 men in black arrived at his home claiming to be working for a magazine. Now someone shows up and they're like, we work for a magazine. We want to interview you on all your research. I'd be like, sweet. Why are you wearing black suits with black ties and black sunglasses and are floating a foot off the ground? But to him, they seemed legit. So they let him in. They interviewed him. They left. A few days later, he realized all of his research had been taken.
So they came in and took it all.
I think what they did in this case, because it's not a very specific article, is they came in, found out what he knew, probably asked to see the stuff. Once they saw it and they knew it existed, then went back in, found it, and took it, or destroyed it. So he reached out to the publication that the 2 MIBs had claimed to be from. That publication stated no one, by the false names they had given, worked for their magazine now or ever, and they had never commissioned an article about him. So it's insult to injury. You're not interesting enough for us to write an article on, asshole.
Wow.
So, after this, Gordon suffers a heart attack. And while he doesn't die, his doctor tells him that the stress from his investigation was literally jeopardizing his life and convinces him to drop it. And after he drops it, he was never bothered by anyone again.
Wow.
So, that one creeps me out because I love you guys. And I love this show. I have so much fun doing it. I'm doing it while I'm super sick. But I will say this. I'm not going to have a heart attack for any topic on this show. Fuck that. No matter how interesting it is, no matter how much I feel like I'm getting to the truth. When I hear about this stuff, I really wonder how easy it is to get lost and at what point your research becomes an obsession, you know?
Right.
How do you go from the guy collecting information to a guy drawing shadow monsters on the walls of the attic? And I'll tell you how you don't get to that point. You limit your topic to 30 to 45 minutes and then you move on with your life. Because if it comes down to what I think is going on, I don't think the men in black are aliens. This is my personal opinion. Are aliens or angels or demons or God. I think they are just legitimately military personnel showing up to tell people, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, I think they work for the government. I think they don't want people to share things.
What you saw is classified. Yep. Keep your fucking mouth shut. I seriously feel like that. There's a saying back in World War II, loose lips sink ships. I've mentioned this multiple times on the show.
What? Fall Out Boy didn't come up with that?
No, they did not. And I know that because my dad used to say that to me when I was a kid. And it's interesting because I was born 40 years after World War II ended. But it was still around then, especially within the military. Because I imagine as the military is developing shit, if it's spotted, they send someone out to tell them, please don't talk about that. We don't need people knowing what we're working on. And I think in most cases, they don't try and use that many words. They just tell them, what'd you see? No, you didn't. Okay? Good. And then they leave. And they use intimidation and things like that. And I think the more time has gone on and the more people are creeped out by stuff, they probably became more organized and or changed their tactics. But if something truly was a UFO of extraterrestrial origin and it showed up and people saw it, I honestly believe they'd still handle it the same way. And it's for the exact reason Tommy Lee Jones says in the movie Men in Black, in the first one. He says, a person is smart. People are dumb, panicky, dangerous animals, and you know it. The best example I can give you, when COVID hit in the United States, people stockpiled toilet paper. Can you imagine how they would react if they found out aliens were real, showed up whenever they wanted, and we had, at best, minimal control over it?
But you can have control over your toilet paper.
Yeah, apparently. Unless
and paper towels.
someone buys them all. So maybe that's just what they programmed me to say. Who knows? I just hope I don't wake up in the middle of the night, pull my curtain back on my window to see a tall, pale dude standing there in a black suit.
I hope I don't see that either.
So,
that sounds horrifying.
That goes for both of us. Leave us the fuck alone. And that, my spooky friends, are the Men in Black.
Nice. Not as cool as the movie. But,
Fuck you.
Movie's fucking good, dude. I think the movie's good.
The first movie is fucking awesome. I
the
love that movie so much.
The second movie's not bad.
Second movie's pretty bad.
The second movie goes into...
my butt, because it was so bad.
No, it goes into Tommy Lee Jones's character more, right? It goes into his backstory.
But I like the way they did it in the first one, where they give you a little bit of his backstory, and he's this grumpy old dude, and he has this woman he's been monitoring since he joined the Men in Black. I just like the first one so much more. I never saw the third one, for the record, so. And
then the third one is cool because you see him, Tommy Lee Jones's character.
He's Thanos, right?
Is he Thanos?
He's absolutely Thanos. He's Josh.
Okay, yeah, he's really young. And there's a really young, Will Smith character. It's just cute. And he helps him when he was, I don't know. I think it's cute.
I've never seen it. All I know is from the trailer, he asks him how old he is, and he says 29. He goes, ugh, got some city miles on you.
What the what?
And I think that's just a hilarious insult. That's all I'll say. For trailers, I gave it a 7 out of 10. It's pretty funny. I've never seen the movie. I've never seen Men in Black International, but it had Chris Hemsworth, and I love that dude, so. But anyways.
I heard it was bad.
Did you? I mean, I heard 2 and 3 were bad, too, except from you, so.
Maybe I just like bad movies. I like Rush Hour. I like all the Rush Hour.
Rush Hour is a great fucking movie. Rush Hour 2 and Rush Hour 3 is really bad, so.
I'll watch them all.
This isn't our movie podcast.
Jackie!
Which hopefully at some point in the near future we will have. Anyways. Alright, that is everything we have for this episode. If you have a story you'd like to send us that can be supernatural, paranormal, coincidental, not necessarily extraterrestrial, but if you do have extraterrestrial, I definitely want to hear it. You can email storytime@scaryish.com, and we will read those on our Storytime episodes that we record at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time every Wednesday. And you can hit us up on our social medias as well. Facebook.com/ScarishPodcast. Twitter is @ScarishPod, and Instagram is @ScarishPodcast. Robin, for folks who would like to donate, how can they do so?
You can go to patreon.com/ScarishPodcast, and those are monthly donations. Tiers start at $1. At $1, you get ad-free episodes, which is great. You can also go to Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/ScarishPodcast, and those are one-time donations.
Indeed. So hit us up. We'd love to hear from you. It's January. It's Patreon. It's Push. Head over there. And that is everything we have for this episode of Scaryish. So Robin, why don't you go ahead and send us out?
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye-bye.